Um, Plato said, but perhaps there is a pattern set up in the heavens for one who desires to see it, and having seen it, to find one in oneself. So, this is my definition of a labyrinth. And I feel like, I mean, I'm an artist, and that's how I approach labyrinths. I'm not a contractor, so I don't like know how to pour cement or like Uh, and I'm not a mason, so I don't, cut stone. I like working with bricks, and I'm also not a landscape architect. So really, I approach labyrinths as a, interactive or installation art, and I think labyrinths are art. It's kind of you. It's really about the experience, right? Just like art. Like if you have the artist the experience of art, then it becomes art for you. And the same thing with a labyrinth. So if you have the labyrinth kind of experience, then it is a labyrinth to you. So there's everybody can have their own definition of what a labyrinth is, and just like you can have your own definition of art. And for me, a labyrinth is a meandering path, often single or unicursal, that leads to a center. And unlike a maze with forced choices or dead ends, a labyrinth is designed for you to find your way. And often people set an intention or ask a question at the entrance. They journey inward, arrive in the center, and then pause in the center. So the center is kind of a place where you can then stand or sit and then retrace your journey back out again. So it's kind of a three-part process. Oh, and this is the most famous labyrinth, in the world, the Chartres Cathedral Labyrinth, which is a medieval labyrinth that dates back 800 years old. So, and then it's often confused, labyrinths are confused with mazes because in some ways they kind of are twins, but they're fraternal twins, not identical twins. So a labyrinth, as I said, it's a single pathway, and the maze has choices and dead ends. And usually mazes have walls to further disorient you, and usually labyrinths are flat or two-dimensional, so that you can see where you're going and you can see the goal. Right. And the maze might not even have a goal, or maybe have multiple goals. And actually, labyrinths are really older than mazes, at least created intentionally, for walking. Labyrinths go back 4,000 years, and people have only really been making mazes as an experience to walk for about 600 years. And so I used to be a photographer, and this is what I mean, so now I'm confusing. This is what a maze to me looks and feels like. So it's a hedge maze in the Dole Pineapple Plantation in Maui, Hawaii. And sometimes when I create labyrinths, they say, "Oh, how high is the hedge going to be?" And so this is more of a hedge maze. But in England, they call them labyrinths. And in some languages like Spanish, there's just one word, laberinto, that would be maze or labyrinth. But to me, this is what a labyrinth feels like or looks. This is the energy and spirit of the labyrinth. It's open, it's centering, it's calming, it's peaceful, it's orderly. Other not like this, frustrating, discouraging, puzzling. Tricking, disorienting. So, um, and as I said, these labyrinths go back 4,000 years, and they're an ancient archetype. Um, and they can be used for many different things. They can be used for walking, meditation, path of prayer, maybe just a site for ceremony or religious practice, ritual. People dance labyrinths historically, and they use it also symbolically, not even, walking, but also worn on jewelry. And this is kind of how you further define a labyrinth. So There's different styles and families, and on the left is the classical labyrinth, which is the oldest and simplest form. And if you count the number of times the pathway wraps around the center, you can determine how many circuits it has. So there's only one path, but this wraps around 7 times. So it's a 7 circuit classical labyrinth. And then on the right is the medieval labyrinth. This is the Chart style labyrinth. And if you count the number of times the path wraps around the center here, it's 11. So this is an 11 circuit Chart medieval style labyrinth. And you can see it has further elements like the rosette in the center and these lunations, these little cogs around the outside. So personally, I feel like labyrinths create sacred time and sacred space. The design creates sacred space, and the pathway, the journey through, is sacred time. And people use it for personal, psychological, spiritual transformation. And they use it to connect to themselves, to their surroundings, and to the community and to others. Labyrinths evoke metaphor, a sense of the sacred, religious practice, the spiritual journey, mindfulness, well-being, and community building. So this is a labyrinth on Vancouver Island in Canada. There's been many books written about labyrinths, and these are kind of different ways that labyrinths are described in literature. So, a watering hole for the spirit, a sure path for uncertain times, a field of light, a cosmic dance, a mirror of the soul, a divine imprint, a crucible of change, a path to your deepest wisdom. I like calling them common ground because it's, open to people from all walks of life. People often ask me, well, what's the oldest labyrinth? What's the first one? And that's what's interesting is that no one knows who, where, or why the first labyrinth was created. So it has this ancient history, but it's mysterious, and no one can say exactly what the labyrinth should be used for. So it's an open source archetype. It can be used in any way, and you can't say that, oh no, this is Christian, or this is, meant to be walked or prayed on, or, this is pagan, or, it's been used in all different, not every culture, but in many different cultures and places around the world. And maybe the oldest ones that we have surviving today are in northwestern Spain, carved onto rocks. And they're thought to be dated to 2000 BC, so maybe 4,000 years old. And they're just, maybe you could trace them with a finger, like a finger labyrinth is what we call it. But you can see it's not walkable. It's carved into stone. But Herman Kern, who created like the compendium of labyrinth history, he has more images of designs. He said that labyrinths are archetypal because they're made anonymously, created in a sacred tradition, often unknown, and have been passed down and perfected through time. So that's what's really fascinating, is that you see the same pattern replicated over and over and over again. It's not like there's 1,000 patterns, historically. I mean, now there are probably 1,000 patterns, but this classical labyrinth was really the predominant labyrinth for like 2,000 to 4,000 years. And it's pretty much the same one. It varies like in shape. So it can be a square, or it varies in size. Like it could be a 7 circuit or an 11 circuit or a 15 circuit classical labyrinth. The oldest one that we can date with certainty is found on this clay tablet from Pylos, Greece. And the palace burned down in 1200, and this tablet had this carving on it, and that was basically fired and preserved in the church, in the palace ruins. And so because the palace burned down and it was a historical event, we know that at least labyrinths are 3,200 years old. But they also appeared on coins and pottery, on frescoes in churches. And in Scandinavia, there's over 600 labyrinths that are 100 years old or more. I've started a fascination with the Nazca lines in Peru. And to me, I think these are the oldest walkable labyrinths. And it also kind of shows you how the labyrinth evolved and came into being because you see some of these are just meandering pathways that go back and forth. Some of them are winding pathways that kind of wrap around a center. You see a double spiral there in the bottom right. And these are very large. So they look like rock carvings, but actually these are like uh, foot and a half pathways, 60 to 100 feet wide. So those like double tracks you see are actually like tire tracks, like going across this double spiral. So this is a car tire tracks. So you can see that this is a huge double spiral. And then this is a really quite close to a labyrinth where it has, four circuits around a center, and then you would walk straight out of the center, which is what we call a processional labyrinth. When it's a one-way labyrinth, you don't retrace your steps back out again. You arrive in the center and you walk straight out. So, I mean, and the evidence is there that these were used for pilgrimage. There's like people left shells and relics in them. There's altars, and they're basically single pathways that now are believed to have been used as walking practice of spiritual ceremonial use, which is really what we're using labyrinths for today. In the Native American Southwest, the Tohono O'odham tribe, they use the classical labyrinth on jewelry and basketry. In India, in the Mahabharata, and some Hindu temples, you see a variation of the classical labyrinth called the Chakravayu, which has a spiral center. And then the next big period after classical labyrinths were Roman labyrinths. So these are labyrinths that were created in houses or palaces and often in mosaic tile. And you can see now the labyrinth is getting more complex. So there's a division into quadrants. And basically you walk from quadrant to quadrant and then into the center, either winding or meandering your way to the center and then back out again. So that really helped spread the labyrinth throughout the Roman Empire and furthered its awareness and use throughout the world. And then the next phase is the medieval period, 800 to 1300. First, in manuscripts, the labyrinth was used symbolically or metaphorically in Christian, but also Hebrew manuscripts. And then there's this finger labyrinth outside of the Lucca Cathedral in Italy, and then the Chartres labyrinth, which survived. It's the best example of a surviving stone labyrinth in the floor of a cathedral that you can still go and walk today. But more research needs to be done in terms of like the history of labyrinths in other cultures and traditions. We kind of have a Eurocentric history of labyrinths. So it's interesting to learn about like the Jericho labyrinth in the Hebrew Fari Bible that dates from 1360s, and you can see these walls of Jericho. So there's these stories of like the seven walls of Jericho, and that creates this six circuit labyrinth, which is pretty interesting. And this Sephiroth can be created in calligraphy and then traced with a finger in a similar form to the way the labyrinth is experienced. So here's a nice photo that I took of the Chartres Cathedral labyrinth lit with candlelight. And now I've been working with Veritas, which is a nonprofit that leads groups on pilgrimage to Chartres Cathedral. So this is one of our private candlelit walks of the stone labyrinth. It is incredible. The next major phase was the turf labyrinths from 1400 to 1800 CE. And these are labyrinths made in the grass, basically, cut into the lawns of Europe, especially England, and some in Germany. And Then labyrinths start evolving into contemporary forms where instead of being divided into quadrants like a cross, they start being divided into fifths or thirds. And there was a humanist named Sigmund Gossenbrot who created this uh, interesting labyrinth on the left that's actually quite nice to walk. But these are, again, manuscript labyrinths. And today we have people making all sorts of labyrinths. Some people are replicating the traditional classical and medieval labyrinths, and other people are designing new labyrinths, based on like the Vesica Piscis or this is the flower in the seed by Tom Vetter. And then this one is by Alex Champion, and it's like a mounded earth labyrinth. Um, so I just love all this. Like, there's so many different designs with different energies and intentions, and some are playful, and some are reverential, and some are whimsical, and some are heartfelt. And Maya Scott is an artist in the Bay Area who works with Roost Table a little bit, and she designed this hand labyrinth because she's a body worker, and you would trace it with your finger in and out of these fingers and then into the palm of her hand. So, and in the Bay Area is really the epicenter of the modern labyrinth revival. Labyrinths may go back 4,000 years, but in the US, they actually haven't been used very long. And it's only been in the last really 35 years that labyrinths have really come into consciousness in the United States, and especially in the Bay Area because of Lauren Artris at Grace Cathedral. So many of you may have seen or walked the labyrinths. There's one indoors and outdoors at Grace Cathedral. So this kind of shows the evolution of her going to Chartres in 1991 and measuring it, and then returning and painting a canvas labyrinth in the basement of Grace Cathedral, and then taking that canvas labyrinth around the United States and teaching people about it. And then eventually they had a carpet that was installed in the cathedral, and then that inspired a permanent labyrinth, both indoors and outdoors, that are available. And labyrinths can be, as I said, finger labyrinths that you trace by hand, but they can also be temporary labyrinths. These are some of the temporary labyrinths I've created out of wood rounds or masking tape, cornmeal, or drawing on the beach. So, there's many different ways to not only experience the labyrinth, but to create them. And when I created a labyrinth at UC Merced, labyrinths also can be in any different environment. So they can be in a backyard, they can be in a school, they can be in a hospital, a retreat center, retirement community. Labyrinths can really fit any setting. And this was a labyrinth we created at UC Merced. And the student regent, Josiah Bahari, he said this at the dedication. He said, "This space extends beyond the individual. It beckons our community to come together, to engage in shared experiences that enrich our collective journey. The labyrinth fosters communal activities, offering a canvas for group walks and mindfulness sessions. In the footsteps of one another, we find connection. We forge bonds, and we discover a sense of unity that is the very essence of our campus spirit." Taking ownership of this space means acknowledging its power to redefine our narratives. It's a declaration that our voices, our stories, and our identities deserve to be celebrated. The labyrinth is a testament to our unity, a reminder that we are all part of a greater whole, and that our collective well-being depends on making space for every voice.